G'day, this is Jamie at the church farm, and wanted to show you a couple of things about putting in a new end post. First thing is how to decide whether you need a new end post or not. If you can take one finger and wiggle the end post, it's probably broken below the ground and needs to be replaced. One of the first things you need to do then is to take off whatever signs that you need to put on the new one. And of course, I would have to get the staple ones. I mean, it works really well for undoing something if you put it together right. And so this was a fairly poor job of how to put these wires on here. It makes these little pigtails on here, and it makes it really tough to get undone. You want to put together something so that in case you need to repair it, it can be undone, rather than almost permanently making it one way. And these staples are not necessarily a good thing, because then it makes it harder to get things off and to put them back on. I know they were trying to be helpful when they first did it, but again, if you have to replace something, it makes it a lot harder. I already pre-dug the end post, so it's about ready to take out. But a couple things I wanted to point out. I've made marks on the handles, and that's literally how deep you have to go to the soil level to be able. You almost have to start hearing Chinese before you or have it deep enough to be able to fully get the end post, the old end post, out of there. And you have to make a V cut going in, because when you get down to a certain depth, you don't have room enough to open your shovel handles until without spreading apart. So now I'm going to pull this out, and there may be some pieces down there that I still have to get. So what we want to do with this hole now is to shave off this side so it's straight up and down. So the post, the whole way down, will be sitting up against fresh soil, untouched soil, so it'll be firmer in place. Remember how I showed before the marks? You've literally got to be that deep into it, or the post isn't going to have enough anchorage in the ground, and it will pull out easier if it's not in deep enough. So now we've got the hole dug for the post. To put in the new post, if there is a bigger end, larger in diameter than the other, you want the larger end in the ground and the skinnier end at the top. You also, if there's a bow in it, you want the bow facing away from the wires, away from the rest of the row, so the tension of it will keep pulling that way. Otherwise, if the bow is towards the rest of the row, it will keep bowing and bending over. So now I pick it up, I give it a bear hug, and I walk it over the hole so I can drop it right down the hole. Okay, I need to shave this off a little bit more, and I need to go a little bit deeper, because when I put it in the first time, it knocked some dirt down in the hole. Because I want these all to line up with the other end post. I don't want an oddball sticking up too high. Again, because that means it's not anchored in the ground enough to hold the tension of the wires. So again, we tried it the first time. There was still some more shaving that I had to do to make it so the post could stand straight up, and it knocked some more dirt back in, so I had to clean that out. So this should be ready to go now. Perfect. That's just perfect. So then I'll push it up against the fresh dirt, and then I'll kick some dirt in. And this bar, I use that flat end there for tamping, but if you need to also, when you're pulling the old plugs out of the ground, sometimes you need to use this bar for prying it out of there. You never want to use the post hole diggers or the shovel for prying, because then you can break the shovel handles. And so then tamping is very important to make sure the post is put in there good and solid. If this post is tamped good enough, it's as good as if it were put in with cement. That's how tight in the ground it is. So you want to tamp this first around the base as much as you can. And then everywhere else. And then we'll put in a couple more shovelfuls. And when you're backfilling with the shovelfuls, make sure you don't have pieces of wood or broken pieces of the vine or whatever put back in there, because that will rot and make it looser at that spot. You want in just solid soil and not in the old wood chunks. So when you are backfilling and tamping in, that most important part is that bottom foot to foot and a half. That really has to be tight. The rest of it doesn't need to be as tight, but you still tamp it all the way up. The other thing is, the reason why we only made that one little V cut on the side is you want as much of the soil around this post to be original hard packed soil, and then it'll stay in there firmer. And the smaller hole you can make for taking out the old post, the less backfilling you have to do. The backfilling is actually what takes more time than the original digging it out, because you have to tamp every couple of shovelfuls you throw in there. So also, once you've gotten to a certain point of filling it in, some of the tamping you can do just by foot power. Once you have it high enough that you can actually put your leg down in there and tamp it in. But even once it is high enough you can start stomping it with your foot, you still want to, when you throw some more fresh dirt in there, to tamp with the rod here right around next to the base of the end post. And then you can stomp the rest in. So what you want to do now is to rewrap. Now that we've got the post in the ground tamped, we want to rewrap the wires. As you know, there are 3 wires on top here. We want to start with the outside wires first and do the 2 outside wires and then the middle wire last. Because if we do just in succession, then it makes that first cross arm be all cattywampus because the wires are pulling it different. Whereas it'll pull it more straighter if those 2 outside wires are very close to each other. So we'll pull this around here. Well, to get this in position here, you use this tool. It's got nice little grabbers here. And you just pull. You can get that really tight with just this tool. You don't have to use a come along or anything else. That's guitar string tight right now. So then you carefully just wrap this around and get the wires as tight as you can to each other so that the wires aren't all over the place. And you go around as many times as you can, and I don't think I'm going to be able to go around again. So now this is one more thing you can do to cinch it up and get a little more tension on it, is to give it that move. I always want the last little piece hanging down to be hanging down rather than out or up, because then it won't poke somebody as easy if it's pointing down. So again, this is the other outside one that we're doing next, so that these wires can be as tight to each other as possible, so it won't make that first cross arm go all cattywampus. Again, that's pretty doggone tight. So we'll wrap this close to each other as many times as we can get it to go around. I don't think it'll make another time. So I'm going to put this in fact, I'm going to put this out of the way. And we'll give it that little cinch. That gives us an added little bit of pressure. And again, we're not trying to put pigtails or anything in there. That makes it harder to undo. And then that last little bit, I pull down so it's pointing down so somebody doesn't get their eye poked out. So then the last thing after we got all the wires tightened, we need to put the numbers back on. I like to have a staple in each corner. And this was the pruner's. He put his name on here so he know he pruned this row. Now the job is done for the end post. If you could, please don't leave the stakes, the broken stakes and the broken end posts out in the field. Please bring them back here and put them neatly in the piles. Okay, now we want to show you how to put in a new stake. The way you can tell if a stake is broken or not, again, with the one finger method, if you put your finger on there and it is just really wobbly, it's broken. In fact, that's the other telltale sign. It can pull out of the ground. So it's broken. So what we want to do first is to undo the nuts off the U-bolt. And you don't have to take them all the way off. Just loosen them enough so the U-bolt can slip over the top of the stake. We also will pull out the staple. And when you're pulling out the staple, you want to do it gradually and easily and even kind of rock it from one side to the other so it comes out straight, because then we can reuse it. In fact, I'll straighten it a little bit. So it can be ready to be reused. And you pull out the staple on top also. Same type of thing. If you rock it back and forth to take it out easily, you can reuse that staple and it'll still be good. And you do want to tighten these up enough that it's literally crimping the metal. It's got to be tight enough that it doesn't wobble anymore. Now when you're putting in a new stake, you don't want to put the new stake right down the same hole unless you're absolutely positive you have all the old plug out. We didn't get all the old plug out, so what you want to do is offset it so it'll be going in just a little bit to the side of where the old hole was, to the east of where the old hole was. Again, if you try and put it down that same hole and it taps into that old plug, the stake will shatter and break before that'll go in. Also, it's better to put the pounder, the stake inside the pounder to put it in place before you start to pound, rather than trying to stand on your tippy toes. Put the pounder on top of the stake once you have the stake up and in place, because I've seen people drop the pounder on their head before. So we don't want any keystone cops dynamics out here. Put the sleeve around the stake first before you put it in. Also, it's important to note that there's a point or a wedge on the bottom of the stake. You want that wedge to be going in line with the row, so it'll be separating through roots, whereas if it's crossways to the row, it'll be chopping into roots. So you want it in line with the row to separate through the roots. And then what I'll do, I'll literally climb up on the berm in between the wires so I can, with my body, pull the wires out of the way for when I'm pounding the stake in. And you want to try and, as much as possible, have it plumb straight up and down. But if it's going to be leaning, it's okay if it's leaning a little bit to the east or the west, or even to the north. But you don't want it leaning to the south, because that's the way the winds want to push it anyway. And then you'll have whole rows falling over if you have a bunch of stakes leaning to the south. Yes, to the south. So then you start pounding. And again, you want this going in square and not diamond pattern to the row, so that the cross arm will be straight perpendicular across rather than at an angle. So you may have to several times re-straighten it. Now sometimes you get to a point where the handle is starting to be in the way, where it's going to be hitting against the old stump. So what you can do, once you've already got it in there to some degree, you can pull it out and take this like this and hammer. So now that the stake is in and at the appropriate height, we want to move this back over here, put the U-bolt over the top, and then start tightening up the nuts. One of the things we want to do also is make sure that the eyelets are closed off in the wire. If that's open, the wire can come out. You don't have to really crimp them down a whole bunch, but you just want to put it down enough so that the wire can't come out. And the other thing we want to do on these when we're tightening them, we want the bolts to be about the same length. We don't want one to be sticking out longer than the other. Make it level. And it just has to be eyeball level. You don't have to have a level on top here, or a sextant, or a transit or anything. Just eyeball level is good enough. What I don't want is for them to be like at a 45-degree angle. I want it basically level and tighten it off so it doesn't wiggle. So one of the last things you do after you put the stake back in is you re-put back in the staples here. You want each of these points of the staple to be going in a different grain of wood. So if you put it straight up and down, a lot of times then the stake will split easier. So you want to slightly tip it so that each nail point is going in a different grain of wood. Once you get it started, then put your hand on the back side here so it doesn't make as much impact to the stake, because if there's a knot in the bottom of the stake someplace, you can break the stake. And as you can see, it takes quite a few times to get it. You never want to put the staple all the way in. You leave enough wiggle room so the wire can still pull. So if we have to tighten wires from different times, and if you put that all the way in, if you drive it home, it will kink the wire. It'll bend the wire, and then it will break there after several years of getting hot and cold, hot and cold. So again, leave enough wiggle room so it can still move. So just in case you didn't catch that, I didn't say it, but I pushed my leg against the wire to push it against the stake to hold it in place, so that I had two hands free to put in the staple. Otherwise, if you're having to hold the wire with one hand or hold the staple with it, it just is too much. Whereas you put your leg against it, it holds it tight up there, and then you can work with two hands. And you're off to the side. It's easier to hammer from the side than right in front. It's just easier to get a swing. And then you also want to put one more staple up here in the top to hold the top wire in place. And the same thing, you don't want to hammer it all the way home. You want to leave a little bit of wiggle room so it doesn't kink the wire like somebody else did the time before. Okay, for raking off the berms, this is what we need to have happen. All these leaves we've got to have out of here, and the brush, the prunings, because if they're there and we spray the berms, then the herbicide will be on the leaves and the sticks and not on the dirt, and then weeds will grow there. So we want to get all these leaves out of here and all these sticks. If there's any of the bigger weeds that you could take out to make more room, you don't have to get out all the smaller stuff because the herbicide will kill those. When you come to a piece of wood or a piece of cement or rocks or stumps that are up on the berm, put it where you've already raked off and then continue raking. We also want to get and rake about a foot away from the berm so that everything's out in the middle of the row, and I want there be like one continuous pile of clippings, not raked into bunches or piles. But anyway, if you've got a sagging hose, we want to pick it up and put a little clip on to hold it in place. And there will be a little hole, that's where the wire goes, and the big hole is where the hose goes. And again, of course, if there's big weeds on the berms, we need to pull those and throw them in the cover crop row. But then the drip hose, what I would like is I don't want to clip right at the end, because periodically, once or twice during the year, I take and drain the hoses to get all the sediment out of the end. And if there's a clip right at the end, it makes it really tough to do that. So come back within, say, 18 inches or so and put a clip on the wire to hold it, so it will sag a little bit on the end, and that's what I would like to have. That will make life a lot easier on me for what I have to do with the irrigation later on in the season. And of course, I want to thank everyone for the gracious work that they do here. Of course, this farm is bigger than us. This stuff goes all over the world, and we're just one little cog of a big wheel of providing food for the poor and the needy.